And we have an agenda. Then it's not just we have signed declaration, but we have a strategy. Then soon we will announce the campaign we want to do. I cannot say more for the moment. We have agreed the text that I will share with you, that is the declaration we signed today. But if we do just a declaration or just a commitment as an industry is not enough. Then we heard from the past there is many topics. Bogdan referred to that. There is issues regarding with stoppages, about leadership, and we have a great case. But we have to share our case, as I said in the start, with everyone. Then we are united as an industry, but we have to show to everyone. Then, with my good friends here, we'll try to see what can be potential strategy, what we have to do, what are the next steps. Having just a campaign will be probably a firework. Then we need something constant on the next year. Then I don't know who wants to start or how we believe will be the next steps, the concrete steps. Fabio.
Okay, last come first to speak. First of all, thank you very much, Kostas, for hosting us tonight at your very beautiful residence, and to your lovely wife for having us. And I very well remember how it all started. Probably it started before, but when we had our meeting in Athens last year, you were the ones who were really pushing for this, something big to happen. And to be honest, at the very beginning, I was like, where does it want? I don't understand where this is going. A little by little, I think, with Mehmet, Glyn, we were all there, a few others, talking about the idea behind IAF, started making better sense to me. And to a point where I thought, well, actually, this is exactly what we need. And I don't know why such a simple idea was not formulated before. So, kudos to you, Kostas, for really mastering and engineering all this. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I'm not directly responding to your question, but I think it's important to say we can be our worst enemies. I think we already recognize that. And I'm going to take a few examples, and this is not to be picking the fight or anything, but I thought they were interesting because we're talking about being together, trying to advocate aviation to the outside world with one voice. And then you read in the press, and I'm sorry, Mehmet, but I go with IATA because that's my, let's say that's the association that you look at. It's pointing the north, right? It's the common wheel, if you will. And then you read in the press that Willie Walsh is lashing out at pretty much everyone. To start with, at ATC, that it's inconceivable that so many delays are being generated by DC, and that they need to take their fair share in the regulation 260.1, and so on and so on. Yeah. We had our burden of criticisms as well, and to a certain extent that's understandable. And I can definitely understand this, but obviously from an external point of view, it shows disunity. It shows that this is a very complex world whereby everyone is looking in silos, and someone, perhaps it was you mentioned silos, and I think this is definitely the case. There are silos that we need to somehow be able to break. Of course, not everything is perfect. We all have our difficulties. We all depend on each other. ATC can generate delays, but airlines can generate delays as well. We are dependent, the ground handlers, on the airlines being on time. If not, we have shifts that go wrong. We have people who need to go home and they can't because the airline still hasn't landed. But we also generate delays, so we are all in the same boats, if I may say, and that requires, I think, to bring the discussion to a meta level, which I believe exactly what you're trying to achieve, Kostas, and that's why I want to say kudos to you. I'm not sure I have answered the question. As a matter of fact, I've just stated the obvious. I'm not sure either that I have an answer to tell you, other than, you know, it always starts with little steps. So you have a bunch of colleagues who meet, and they have fun, and they discuss, and they draw some things on the table, or and they take it for a while, and they think about this, and after a while, you can have another person join in, and a second, and a third, and in the end, you have, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 10 associations, and this is no snowball effect, because then you have the attention of the Salvatore Shakitano of this world, who think, well, these guys, they're making sense. Let's listen to what they have to say, and perhaps I want to be part of this as well. And that's what he has proven to us, and this is again thanks to you and to your excellent network and interpersonal relationship skills. So, no, in a nutshell, I would say that is the way to go. And perhaps just a parenthesis, CAF 3, SAF, everything, sustainability, yeah, sure. But we are not the only one being let's say, criticized. Of course, it's always, people love to hate aviation. Right? They love to hate aviation. We know this, and we need to make it, to make with it. And I do believe that when you read in the press that this industry is attacking that other industry within the value chain, that doesn't work. We're going to make it, definitely. And SAF or hydrogen or whatever is going to come is going to be the next challenge. But after that, there will be another one, definitely. Whether it's a next pandemic, whether it's the automation that doesn't work the way it's supposed to function. I don't know. Whether it's the lack of resources, personnel, that has been addressed in the previous panel. There will be many other things, but there will always be a challenge that this industry has to be faced with.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, well, there are a lot of issues that separate us, but divide us. But as many people, 80% of the things we do are in common, and we have a common interest, and we are united. Either safety, security, and other aspects. Of course, there will be tensions. It's like to be a family. In the family, there is always tensions. And the problem is to keep this inside the family. Don't make it public, because that damage ourselves. Then we are an easy target. We were in the past. But before I give the floor to the other two, I will always give this example because it was a recent one. And then because we said about aviation, and yeah, we are an easy target. Then they want to say about the environment and so on. But what we saw over the years after COVID is that everyone jumped to a plane, they forgot about if it caused a problem, environment, whatever, they want to fly and they want to go into holidays. Then we saw recovery of the industry much faster than expected, and caused problems like especially the ground handlers, because there was not enough staff, or they didn't predict that it would be recovered so fast. And I give the example of this year, then at the start of the year, Google making an announcement, press release, something like that, about what is the job most searched, the dream job in Google. And surprisingly, was to be a pilot. Then it's not a YouTuber, it's not an influencer, but it's a pilot. Then we are still sexy. And then people, if you go to all the major news, they say about aviation, they say about flight, they say about destinations. Then we have to sell ourselves better, and this is, we have to improve dramatically, and not tomorrow, yesterday. Mehmet, comments?
First of all, we have to separate the extraordinary times and the normal times. And we have one philosophy. Are we going to create fight from our differences or synergy? This is the question that we have to answer. And we choose among us to create synergy from our differences, because our differences are our assets. But when the extraordinary time comes, like the Corona period, as an association, we empower the DG, besides the name, to be harsh, and he was criticized not to be that harsh. And I 100% endorse what he said. He was right. Why? Always look at from our end customer perspective. At the end of the day, if something goes wrong, customers blaming the aviation industry. And in the aviation industry, airlines. Why? Because they buy the ticket from the airlines. They are paying the fee to the airlines. And if airlines are working with ground handlers or the tower or the others, it's not their job. So at those days, for example, as my company, we had a 1st of July disaster in Germany. And that was totally because of the ground handling companies' misinterpretation. But if I tell this as a company, because we are doing it face to face, next day it will be tough for me. So that's why we use the associations and we establish the associations to advocate on behalf of us where we cannot directly open the file. But this was an extraordinary time. It passed last year, and I hope it won't happen in the future again, because all of us now experience if business stops for 1 year, what's going to happen. This idea came through because of our differences, our assets, and how we can unite our forces. Why? Very simple. As I'm always saying, aviation industry is an ecosystem. Without one, the other is idle or useless. So in order to be strengthen our position, like in the environment issue, just a parenthesis, when we look at the aviation, the carbon footprint is total in the whole global world is 2.7%. But when we go to the land transport, it is almost 11.5, 4 times higher. Again, when we look at the aviation, aviation is the only industry which announced 2050 net zero carbon target. Where is the land transportation or sea freight? They are not there. So, why everybody is attracting us is a good question to us. And who was sponsoring some people to attract us? As Jeff said, it's a perfect scenario. And who was behind that lobby will see in time, and it will come true. So, aviation is important as the speed increases, as Deputy Minister Bogdan said, speed is everything, and we want to do something fast. So, just again, an example from my country. If you go from Istanbul to the Iranian border city, or to the Georgian border city, or to the Black Sea city, it took you 2 quarters or 2.5 hours. But if you come to West, you come to Vienna, you go to Milan. This is a big country. If you take the bus, it took, according to the traffic and the time of the year, 24 to 26 hours. So you can't stop people when there is a high-speed technology, high-speed internet. You can download the questions you ask to ChatGPT in seconds. Tell them you have to write 24 hours to go to your home. This is nonsense. Or look at the tourists. Turkey and Greece are main touristic destinations for the Europeans. And this year, I think 54, 55 million tourists are coming to Turkey. Can you say a tourist, you have a week to spend, but you have to go from UK to Turkey either by sea or by bus. By bus, it will be taking approximately 50 plus hours. And you're going to pass from 7 different countries. Because you're out of Brexit, you need to get transit visa for those 7 countries. But don't take it as a serious. You're going to have a vacation. Out of your 1 week, you're going to spend 3 days on the roads, at least, but you will have 4 days vacation. That's nonsense. It doesn't work. So we have to act as one voice. Why? If you ask this question yourself, what makes the industry awake at night? There are 6 or 7 headlines. Nowadays, the most important one, because of the CAF, is of course, COP28 is the environment issue. When we look at the CAF and the environment issue, 5%. What does that mean, 5%? There is going to be production, and the aviation companies, airline, and for certain ground handling purposes, we're going to buy the SAF. On paper, it looks very good. But when we start to go to the third dimension, is there enough production of that 5%? Who's going to produce that? In which geography that will be produced? When we look at from today to 2030, existing investments, incentives, and plans are not enough to fulfill that 5%. I'm not talking about the 65% to achieve net zero carbon in 2050. There's only one country, which is United States, making huge investment and announced investments. They're going to produce 9 billion liters or 9 million tons for 2030, and which is almost half of the required amount by the airlines at that time. And think that you're Qantas flying in Australia and you would like to use SAF, and you have huge intent to use it, but you're going to buy it from United States. Your country is not producing it. What is going to be the cost? This year, the cost is 2.8 times. I believe that because of there is no investment coming into the IATA, it's going to be 2.8 times also. So, as long as this cost is at this level, who's going to pay? I would like to recall you what France did this year. They want to promote the SAF manufacturing, and they said to the manufacturers, you have to provide 1% of your jet fuel as SAF. If not, as a punishment, you're going to pay 12.5 euros per metric ton as a penalty. What happened? None of them make any money. And they paid the penalty. Then what happened? They charged us. And what happened? We charge all of us, which is using airlines. So, from this perspective, we have a lot to do, and those 6 or 7 items which make us awake is becoming very crucial. Yes, 2 days ago, IATA made the annual press conference of the year end. The total turnover of the aviation this year is going to be 1 billion USD. And when we look at the percentage-wise, it is 97% of 2019 levels. Domestic is 105%, and international is 93% due to the late opening of the Chinese market, and because European carriers cannot fly through Russian airspace to the Far East. These are the hurdles because of the 93%. And the total turnover is 1 billion. And what is the profit? 1 trillion. Sorry.
1 trillion, yeah, 1 billion sounded.
1 trillion. And what is the total profit? It's 94 billion. Almost 2/3, 2.4%. Whole aviation industry is making 24 billion. When we look at the fossil fuel manufacturing, only one company is making that amount of profit of the whole aviation industry in 1 quarter. Or in September, October, one company spent $130 billion to acquire 2 small companies in the United States. $130 billion. How much they invested? Not even a fraction of that to the SAF. So these are the issues. Engines are problems. Most of the companies are grounding their aircraft. Spare parts are problems. Lack of human capital is problems. Supply chain disruptions on the delivery of the aircraft, brand new aircraft, is the disruptions. So we have so many issues. That's why almost a year ago, in a very nice restaurant in Piraeus, in front of the stadium, we discussed these chaps and try to create synergies from our differences, but not war. And we are here at the war.
Yeah, well, continue. I mean, there is a lot of progress. Imagine with all these challenges that you refer, that we have a common ground to work together. And well, as I said, we are here 4, but in total we are 9 in IF, and including the president of ICAO that is supporting us quite extensively. And also, you know, one other thing, we had in Dubai a press conference between ICAO and the industry about the outcomes of CAF3, and Glyn was there in the panel, and then that's a good initiative that we work together, and there is more and more common ground of collaboration that is not just in theory or just words, but something in action, and tell at the end what is the action. Glyn.
Okay, well, thank you very much again for inviting me, and many happy returns. Happy birthday. You look pretty good for 35.
There is one more birthday tomorrow.
Ah, okay, so
Jeff.
Who's that, Jeff? Oh.
Jeff the 55.
which is why we have to wait till midnight 01, then when we wish Jeff happy birthday.
Wait until you've seen the socks. Right?
I wish I wore my matching socks today. Today mine are just plain. Bad pun, sorry. One thing I think we would all agree in this room is that aviation is, and to quote IATA, a force for good. It's an enabler of economic benefits, it's a mover of emotions, and it's a mover of feelings, which is when we move people, creating feelings, etc. But that view is not shared by everybody outside of this room. And that's really what we need to focus on a lot more. I spend probably 3/4 of my life traveling, and almost every trip I make, I'm encountered with something where somebody says, we don't need aviation. As Ricardo had mentioned earlier, we've got Schiphol. It's too noisy, let's take 20% of the slots away. That's been deferred, I think, to The Hague, but it's still not been resolved, and it's still impossible for airlines and people within the ecosystem to do any effective planning or investment because they know it's going to loom up. We have cargo-only airports like Liège. They had to go for environmental recertification. There they had to make cutbacks on 4-engine operations, certain night curfews, and this is for an airport that's in the middle of nowhere, basically with no local ecosystem. Brussels is going through the same thing. They're actually going to have to make the same restrictions. They're actually even looking at restricting 777 operations there. I go and actually speak to pharmaceutical manufacturers. They say we need to move away from air cargo. We want to move 70% of our cargo onto ships. I speak to flora horticultural organizations and flower growers in Kenya. They want to move away from aviation because they're told we're far more polluting than all the other modes. The facts do not necessarily bear the truth to this, because if you take a ship and you land in the edge of a continent, and yet your cargo, your pharmaceuticals, etc., need to be delivered inland, you have a very sizable chunk of land-based transport which is not necessarily calculated in that end-to-end emissions factor. I was in an event last week in Luxembourg, European Aviation Summit, which was at 150 research bodies, academic institutions, and regulators. The OECD made a report on the sustainability aspects of aviation, not cargo, aviation. Their recommendation to policymakers is you need to restrict demand. That's their answer to the very, not recognizing all of the positive effects that we're doing, they're saying you need to restrict demand. I immediately put to them and said, from a cargo perspective, if you've got a plane that's 75% full of fresh salmon, pharmaceuticals, and general cargo, and if you put artificial tariffs in there to restrict demand, 20% of that cargo will drop off. The plane will still need to fly for the fresh salmon and the pharmaceuticals, but it's now not optimized. And the cargo that you forced off has to find other means. So you're actually making a worse situation. Schiphol restricting these slots actually increases the environmental impact because the cargo will land somewhere else, but it has to be trucked back to the Netherlands because that's where the distribution centres are. So when you recognise that we are under attack, and I think we do need to use those kind of, war was mentioned earlier, I think we have to start with the position this industry is under attack. Only 15% of the global population travels. That's various research bodies around the world. And yet in Europe it's much higher, and yet in Europe is where they're actually attacking that. That's where the biggest benefit comes from. Coming back to Ricardo's point about the S. This is something I 100% agree with you. We do not do absolutely anywhere near enough. And this is where I do agree that we spend too much time publicly infighting. We should always infight. We're a family. All families fight. They need to continue to fight because that's how you express emotion. That's also how you find a way to live and work together and improve things. But when we take it publicly, that allows other people to latch onto that and say, see, these guys don't even agree amongst themselves. The S, let's look at the S. When was the last time anybody read an article about 100 million children every year who benefit from vaccine and inoculation programs moved by air cargo? Never. You never see that. During COVID, yes, we were on CNN. Great. We had our time in the spotlight because people needed PPE. That was flying on beautiful passenger planes, etc. But once that finished, it was back to business as usual. Now you're the polluting cousin of the global transport sector. We don't want you around anymore. So we have to recognize that we've got to combat, and we really do need to look at it from a military perspective. It's not just about occasionally coming out saying, hey, aviation's great, thanks very much, we'll be off. We've actually got to come in and say that, and again, forgive me for talking about air cargo as I often do, air cargo moves about 35% of global trade by value. So we generate, or what we generate, we move cargo. This gentleman here and his colleagues out there with this beautiful aircraft and these airlines, they move about $8 trillion worth of goods. That enables 2 million people in Kenya to put food on the table and send their kids to school. It counts hundreds of millions of people around the world who've got small and medium-sized enterprises now, thanks to global e-commerce platforms, can reach global markets. The aviation industry directly contributes to 15 of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. When was the last time we wrote an article on that? I don't think we did. I don't think we went out there and said we're doing absolutely everything from establishing more equal and inclusive trade. Kazakhstan and Central Asian states are doing far more than we are for creating inclusive trade, focusing on the very simple fact, and it comes back for attracting and retaining. One of the biggest impediments for women-only businesses in Central Asian states is that when they have to deal with customs, they're all men, and the men won't deal with them. So if they have an issue of exporting, nobody will answer that question. So the answer is, well, let's get more women in customs. So there's a lot of trade development now which is focusing on that. If we can get more women in customs, we can create a new career opportunity for the women, and it will also create 10 times as many opportunities for developing businesses. So the sad thing for me is I do read the blogs. There was another one that actually came out today, which was not written by Willie, but it was the cargo press saying IATA's gone invisible, which it's not invisible, but if they don't see it, they perceive them as invisible. And we need to really unite. IAF, I think, is the best opportunity we've got. Yes, we've highlighted a couple of areas of commonality, but we haven't yet devised how we take those areas of commonality and take them from preaching to the converted, as we say, to preaching to the ill-informed. And that's what we have to do. We have to preach to the people who right now, we're in a boxing match with our hands behind our backs, tied behind our backs, and somebody's just jabbing us, saying, man, you're 2.5. And a statistic on the 2.5 that I counter almost everywhere. I love this phrase. If they did nothing, it would be 27% of global emissions by the year 2050. And I immediately respond to those people and saying, why are you assuming everybody else is then going to do something, and yet us, We're saying, well, you guys are going to do nothing, so you're going to be 27%. We're doing far more. First mode of transport to come up with a net zero objective for 2050. First one that came out, and this is where the CAF3, it was very close, but it was so crucial to come out with that 5% target. And people said it's only 5. It's a 25-fold increase from where we are now. 0.2% SAF availability. Again, you look at the availability and say, well, who's going to pay for it? Even at the 2.8%, Inditex, the world's largest retail chain, said they will buy every drop that atn.aero can get hold of. Absolutely every drop. Then we come to the other aspect, which is something I think was mentioned about the survey, the census, about would you pay more for a ticket? What percentage of passengers actually offset when they actually tick that box? 2%. 2%. And yet, the other 98% will say, oh, it's too polluting. It's his fault. No, he's making margin of a cup of coffee per seat. There's not enough money in that margin to actually pay for it. It's a shared responsibility. We have to really be much more aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting. And I meant to add on top of this, there was a discussion before that also in Europe, we also have an extra issue that perhaps other continents or other regions in the world may not have, or at less extent. I spent yesterday literally the whole afternoon discussing with the European Commission on the PPWR, the package and the package waste regulation. And it is crazy how little details can really take such a huge proportion for the European Commission. We mentioned over-regulation. We mentioned that before. It's true that everyone is looking at the European Union, but I'm afraid that the European Union is sort of bogged down a little bit in an antiquated positional view with respect to aviation. And obviously, we're now trying to convince people to take the train, night trains. That's the big thing now, night trains. To come back to your example. So it's great because now you can take the train at 9 o'clock in the evening and be where you want to be at 8 o'clock in the morning the day after because you spend the night there in the train. And then they realize that actually no one is doing this because it's so constraining. It is so constraining, it doesn't work. People want to go fast. And on top of that, if you're looking at trains, they have their own issues as well. I mean, trains are monopolies. In most of Europe, they are being heavily subsidized.
And there's one other thing. I haven't seen never a load factor of trains because this is really, you say environmental friendly, but if there is half empty the train, how environmental friendly?
Well, just even on that environmental friendliness, again, we have the rail union that are constantly saying our trains are 1/100th of polluting factor versus air. What they don't mention is the impact of the infrastructure of laying those tracks. You build 3.6 kilometers of train tracks, it takes you 3.6 kilometers. You build 3.6 kilometers of highway, it takes you 3.6 kilometers. You build 3.6 kilometers of runway, it takes you anywhere in the world. And when you look at even in the UK HS2, that was going to destroy wetlands, it was going to destroy marshes, it was going to destroy homes, it was going to destroy farms, it was going to destroy forests. And the impact of that would be felt for decades and decades and decades. We're not aggressive enough for that. Just coming back, one other comment about regulation. If you take a typical smartphone, several hundred components in there, the EU in its supply chain awareness says, well, everything's digital now. We want a digital record of every product that comes into the EU with every aspect of every component, where it was manufactured, who manufactured it, the sustainability aspect of that manufacture. And sadly, this just goes to show that some people's grip on reality is lacking. It's impossible to do, and it stifles this. So sadly, we also have to counter the fact that there are good regulators around the world with good, I don't want to be negative on all regulators, there are some very pro, and I don't mean our industry, but pro-industry regulators. We do have some very good ones. They tend to sit in the room, and that's a good indicator. You see the good ones. You don't see the bad ones. The bad ones sit in back rooms and they come up with proposals. Again, one in the FAA, the FAA, one of the senators from Texas said, well, because of sanctions that we have now, of course, US carriers can't overfly Russian airspace, etc., he said, but other carriers are overflying Russian airspace, so we want to penalize those. So they actually wanted to take sanctions out against Middle Eastern carriers, against Turkish carriers, against Chinese carriers. That is not state-based sanctions, that's now company-targeted sanctions, which is absolutely an area we do not want to go in this industry. So we have to be more vocal on the benefits of this industry, we have to be more vocal on the need for effective and facilitatorial regulations.
Then, next steps.
What
we do?
We have,
I mean, we identify, we have a problem.
no, we have no issues about coming together. But hypocrisy is a word I love. We have to ask one question, not only as the countries, as associations, as industries, but as a person. What am I doing to save the pollution, to be environment friendly? The issue is lying under this question. Everybody is expecting something from the others. But when it comes to yourself, everybody can say that. Oh, you don't have to fly by airlines. You don't have to use plastic strokes or the cutlery or the products. Okay. Am I doing that? Am I recycling all the plastic products or recyclable products or the glassware and other stuff in my office? Am I closing the light when I am leaving the office? Am I turning off the air conditioner when I am leaving the office? Or the example I showed to Jeff, am I using a photocopy paper double-sided when I'm printing a document? Am I using the empty side, if it is not confidential, as a note paper? Or am I throwing away? We have to ask, am I printing it colored or grayscale to save the printer cartridge? This is the mentality we have to ask the question. If we are not asking that question, we will be using hypocrisy like the emo. Dig our head to the sand and think that nobody sees us. We are in a way like that as a human being and the nature. Everybody is expecting. Have you heard about the waste islands in somewhere in the down Pacific? Those waste islands are as big as Australia at the moment. And they made a big search because of the tides and the global ocean system. It goes to that location and it became as big as Australia. And when they search those products in that island, I think they find the oldest one is 1956 manufactured plastic. From where? From Western countries. Either Western Europe or from the United States. I didn't dump those waste to the sea. Nor my country, nor my parents, nor my friends. So, someone polluted the world. Now that someone is saying that, don't pollute the world. So, this is hypocrisy.
Just coming back to something you said, what do we do now? And I think one of the things we should perhaps also do, and this comes back to, I think that's a great way that Mehmet phrased it, which is, you should do this, but I'm still going to do it, because it's more important that you look after and clean life, and I'm okay to pollute. So I think one of the things we should perhaps look at doing first of all is cataloguing what he's done today. If I'm not mistaken, this gentleman here is the first airline around the world that had sustainability-based financing, green-based financing. Phenomenal. For those of you, it's public, so people should research it. It is actually phenomenal. It also includes some board commitments about inclusivity, etc. It's phenomenal. This gentleman's members have invested in electrification of vehicles. There is some great stuff that's being done, and it's one of the things we should probably talk to Haldane at ATEC is that we don't do enough of cataloguing. It would probably be a huge list of the great stuff that we're doing. Edmonton Airport, phenomenal stuff. They're generating 110 megawatts into the Canadian grid beyond that they need to run the airport. They're researching different infield grasses to see which ones capture more carbon. They've got hemp plants growing there. They've got strawberry plants going there. They're actually even going to look at seaweed farms, anything they can do. So we've even got people like Liège looking at marshlands. So this industry, collectively, across the board, if you think about things that unite us, what unites us is all of our great activities, whether or not it's airlines investing billions in more fuel-efficient fleets, whether or not it's cargo companies looking at lightweight materials for ULDs. They're looking at single-use plastic in the air cargo industry was a huge problem. Thankfully, it probably wasn't been there, but I'm sure some of it. So now a lot of the ground handling companies, again, Fabio's members, are investing in soluble plastics, seaweed-based plastics, biodegradable plastics, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times the regular price, but it's the right thing to do. So if we were to start cataloguing the right things, when we start cataloguing everything we do, that to me buys us credit to now start saying, this is what we are doing, this is how we're trying to tackle the challenges today, not just relying on 2050. 2050, I've had this argument with my daughter, 2050 is her lifetime again away. And she said, that's too long. She said, I can't remember being born, but you're now making me wait till I'm, again, my life, 27 more years, that's when you're going to be net zero. And then I say, no, that's the end result. But what we're doing now, and we've done for the last 5, 10, 15 years, aviation today is, I believe, I can't remember the right figure, I'm going to throw the wrong figure up, but infinitely more fuel efficient per kilometre than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Huge improvements. So I think we need to catalogue what we're doing. That effectively buys us the credit to then start being quite aggressive. And then we, I think, need to really start being vocal.
In the sense that, like, having stories. I mean,
absolutely, stories.
We about,
and they're good stories.
But Jeff gave the tip. Here we can write books. We can make the cataloging. But the most important is what will be the headline that we're going to submit to the intermediaries, which are the journalists, to serve it to our end customer, which are the clients of ours, internally and externally. Internal clients are also creating our employees.
Mm-hmm.
They are also aware. People started to question, what are you doing for the ESG or DEI side as a company? And they're making their selection according to that. So doing something is not enough anymore. We have to present that in the way our audience wants to buy it. Just presenting is not anymore.
It's got to be compelling.
Yeah.
And I think, I fully agree, and I think that you mentioned ATAG. I think that ATAG is a great platform to look at because they were quite successful, even though they were obviously airline oriented, mostly, if not only. But I think if we could establish a similar model of ATAG, but with the entire ecosystem via IAF, and look at the same mentality that they developed throughout the decades, I guess now, I think that we could possibly be able to reach out to the layman and explain to him and her what makes sense, what speaks to them.
But don't forget what Andrew was saying, that ATAG can be part of what we do.
Yes,
and where they stop with help them. I mean, it's not that we overlap, or then they're doing a different job, they do a great job, especially representing the interest of the industry in ICAO, and I was with Heldan in Dubai, we were together, then, it do a great job. He's in COP28 right now, representing, again, the interest of the industry. Then we have to collaborate and to find the common ground to...
And we have to question everything.
To
question. We have to turn every single stone for the sake of the globe and for our industry. So we have to question what we are doing, why we are doing, how we are doing, when we are doing, the basics of the journalism.
I agree. And another thing we need to do, which we have done pretty poorly in the past, I think we're probably all guilty of this. When we want to give some good news about something, we make a LinkedIn post. And it's read by all of our contacts and all of our network and everybody that already knew what we were doing anyway. If we want to change hearts and minds, we have to communicate in a compelling way through their medium, which is TikTok, which is Instagram Reels, and it's Snapchat, and it's 30 to 60 second sound bites. Whereas we're going to record a 28-minute video saying all the great stuff. After 15 seconds, they've gone off it. So we have to look at the message, the vehicle of which that message is actually presented, very visual based. I don't think there's an industry on this planet that can have as good visuals as we have. Whether or not it's the visuals from a cargo's perspective of moving, somebody mentioned about humanitarian relief. You know, this is another aspect. I had an argument with somebody as well that was anti-aviation. And I said, who wants to tell all those sad people that suffered after the earthquake earlier this year, or every time there is an earthquake anywhere, or a hurricane, or whatever it is, that I'm sorry, all the planes have been taken away, your humanitarian aid is on its way, it's on a Maersk vessel, and it'll be here in about 75 days. People have 48 hours before they start dying. They need diphtheria tablets, they need water, they need sanitation treatments, they need food, they need blankets, they need shelters. It all flies in on aeroplanes. So we have some great stories. It's not just people hugging each other, it's not just flowers being given, it's not sitting on a beach, although these all sound very lovely things. But it's collectively really visual, very compelling, and we do need to get that message for that. That's the generation, that's the Greta generation. The Greta generation, when they did those strikes in Geneva, I went and filmed them because they were all on their phones. And I wanted to, my kids were actually part of that, and I said, please let me have a banner saying, how the hell do you think the energy was produced to charge your phone? She said, don't do that, Dad, you'll embarrass me. So she just put her phone away. But this comes back to, they're not educated, they're going off of sound bites. We've lost the battle for that headline and that soundbite. People are now looking at contrails and saying, oh, contrails are blocking out the sun. That's actually going to add another 1 degree just with contrails. And yet the science behind it is actually not there. So we do have a lot of work to do.
I have your headline for the next COP28 or whatever. We ban, other than the good DGs here and the politicians being in this room, we ban them from flying, and they need to go by train or by boat, right?
Together with Greta.
Together with Greta.
The Belgian Minister of Transport
my favorite
is saying, I've flown 4 times in my life and I regret all 4 of them. Greta, she didn't want to fly to New York, so she took the boat. Where do you think all of her luggage and everything? They couldn't get on a boat, they flew it, air cargo. Talk about hypocrisy, okay?
Last comment before we close.
So, Jeff, the highlights is going to be, don't lie to us.
I just wanted to add one thing on sustainability. You know, this industry, and I say it coming from mining, sustainability, this industry, it's something that no other industry would have done. In the midst of the worst crisis, you still committed to deadlines, you still have goals. Nobody said we're moving 2050 to 2060. Yeah, nobody said, and nobody seized on that from a communications point of view. When you have mining, you have problems there, they say, oh no, you can't come and ask for that permit because, you know, we have this. Even a mudslide doesn't allow us to do that. And that's another point. You've stuck to, in the worst of your local, industrial economies, you stuck, you were sticking to the plan.
For me, I'm going to come back to what Ricardo says, social responsibility. I think we've got to unite around that because we've got to get a way to actually really impact from regulators, business community, the flying public, the next generation of leaders, and the school children who are still in school today, but will be the decision makers of tomorrow.
Fabio, last word.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I think this is the right time and the right setup in order to do that. And I think I can speak on behalf of the others to say, we're a little bit looking at you, Kostas, because you're the journalist. You're journalist, you're the one who will convey the message. We can give you the material.
I think we had thanks for your comments, but I think we had a really great discussion, and we had a food for thought, and I think we had a really great panel. Then join me to thank them for being here. International Aviation Summit is not just another conference, but is action. Then we started last year. We launched IAF, that is already existing. We work behind the scenes, behind closed doors, because the idea is to work together and find a common ground. Then I'm really pleased and honored to share with you the outcome of the discussion and the declaration we will sign downstairs in a few minutes. But let me give you a little bit the background and what we are going to sign. As we said, the first initiative is to work together and to find an area that is promoting ourselves. And as my fellow friends and members of IAF said, we have to work and we have to find ways to show what we have achieved so far. Then the title of what we do is Aviation Sustainably Connecting Our World. And we say that the aviation industry is making huge investment in new technologies in order to achieve our commitment of net zero emissions by 2050. The aviation industry carries everything, as also Dr. Chitra said, from essential goods such as medicines, as also Glyn said, emergency equipment, to products such as electronic devices, iPhones, for example, and flowers, and everything in between. And aviation brings economic vitality to communities. Many communities around the globe, and also here in Greece, are linked with their transportation and countries, and supports millions of jobs. And is the backbone of global connectivity. Waving steps 3 that unite people, families, and business across continents. We, and I will share the names after I say what they were committed, to work together in order to promote the value and benefits of aviation. Those that supporting and signing this declaration are Fabio, Gamba, Angela Gittens, President of Hermes, Simon Hoppard, DG of Kenzo, Glyn, Hughes, that is here, myself, Yvonne Manzi Makolo, the current chair of IATA, Candace McGraw, that is the incoming, starting the 1st of January, chair of ACI World, and last but not least, Mehmet Nane. Then, as you see, we move forward, we have an action plan, we had the discussion, not just to have a discussion, but to work together and to make it happen. I know it's not easy, there are differences, but united we can make it happen, and I think we believe that it's feasible.
There is no impossible for us, it only takes some time.
Exactly. I would like to thank you for being part in this conference of this year edition, and I will ask all of you to go slowly downstairs, and we have two signatures. The one is the MOU between Hermes, my organization, but I have also in my board Mehmet and Andreas, with TIACA, with Glyn Association, and that is leading as a Director General, followed by the declaration that we are going to sign the person that we have.